So first of all, just a few introductory remarks. You know, every religion has its own kind of, personality and characteristics. And one thing is Hinduism is quite unique in a lot of ways. It's very different from other religions. First off, it's one of the oldest religions, and of course it's indigenous to India itself. Around 85% of the population would regard themselves as Hindus, and it is way more a way of life. It's sort of a whole cultural religious tradition that developed in India over thousands of years. Okay. It's very different from other religions in the sense that it does not have a founder, okay, one particular person that started this religion, as you would say with Buddhism or Sikhism or Jainism, other religions that are part of India. And then, of course, you know, other world religions, they usually have a founder, one person that starts that religion is a key figure in the founding of it. And so a lot of the beliefs and practices that develop in that religion are grounded in that particular individual and their teachings. Okay. And so we don't have this here. Instead, what we have is the evolution of religious beliefs and practices that develop in India over thousands of years. And the result is it's a bit messy. You've got a variety of different little movements and trends and teachers and new practices and new ideas that come along. And a lot of it can sometimes be contradictory because, you know, it develops here, it develops there. And in India, they'll try to integrate it as much as possible and make it all a part of the Hindu way of life. And so there's a lot of, the result is a lot of diversity in this religion, more so than others. Okay. And with it, there can be some tension in terms of, you know, there are some very different beliefs and practices involved here. And for an outsider, you could think, well, this is inconsistent. How could he have all these different beliefs and practices within one religion? And for them, they say, you know, there are many ways to God. You know, there are many different paths all going up the same mountain. They will all get you there. And so Hinduism tends to be quite inclusive of all the diversity that it contains. And so it's commonly said that in Hinduism, we've got something for everybody. You know, something for different personality types. People who are really into the heart and the emotion and really into wanting to love and worship God. You've got something like the Bhakti movement, which is focused on loving devotion towards God and praise of God. That's something there for them. And then others who are more intellectually oriented, you know, they'll more get into particular types of Vedanta philosophy, which is more abstract and focusing on enlightenment and seeing God, so to speak, in more abstract, impersonal terms as a supreme consciousness, right? And then there are those that are just more practical, very much into service and good works and good karma. You know, they'll have that kind of element there in Hinduism. So it's got something for a variety of people. And, you know, everybody can be happy. Everybody can find their place in Hinduism, right? Is sort of the idea. So that's one thing to be aware of. So if you find yourself getting a little bit lost and confused, it's well, geez, you know, how could one religion also believe this, but also believe that, and then believe this and that? And there's all this diversity. It can be strange for people, especially depending if you come from a particular religious background where it's very cut and dry, very clear. You have to believe A, B, C, D, period, and not many other options here, right? You may find this quite strange, that this religion is quite the opposite. Okay, so then we'll go into all of this, but this is just a little bit of a heads up. This is what we're finding here. Now, as I say here on this first slide, that the term Hinduism is not an indigenous word. It's something that was evolved over time as a result of, first of all, when Muslims come into India and they refer to the people that lived along the Indus River Valley there, when you come into northwestern part of India, they were then referred to sort of the Hindus, you know, the people of that river. And that's where the word comes from. So it's something that really is more imposed from the outside. Okay, it's not indigenous to the people themselves. The term that they have traditionally used to refer to their religious tradition is Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana meaning eternal. Dharma is law. The law or the truth or the cosmic order, that which is established. Okay, that's sort of the various meanings of Dharma. Is like, it's what establishes the truth, it's the law, it's the order of things. Okay, and this is the eternal order. That's sort of the word and phrase that's used. Okay, so to start off with, though, and we'll be looking into this, is also a religious tradition that is very much has been strongly influenced by outsiders, these semi-nomadic tribes known as the Aryans that come into the region around 1500 BC. Right? And we'll be talking about that in a little bit. But to start off with, oh yeah, here I provided a little bit of an outline. I usually provide this as a handout in class, which I can't do. So it's here for you. Just so you have a bit of an outline map of what we're going to cover. We're going to look at first what's often referred to as the Pre-Vedic period, which is before 2000 BC. The earliest civilization that we find in India, the Indus Valley civilization, or also known as the Harappa civilization. I'm going to take a brief look at that in terms of what we know in terms of beliefs and practices and whatnot. Then we go into what's called the Vedic period that begins around 1500 BC or so and goes on for a few hundred years. And this is when those Aryan tribes come in and we get a bit of an introduction of foreign practices and beliefs. And the Aryans bring with them their priests, the Brahmin priests, their Vedic deities, a lot of the rituals, some of the beliefs, their scriptures, the language of Sanskrit. Okay, all these things were brought in by the Aryans, and I don't know how you can get around denying that. And then the indigenous people are the Dravidians. All right, we'll look into that a bit. And then things evolve and develop here, where we get into a very creative time, which is often called the Upanishadic period, or sometimes the later Vedic period, where there's a lot of creativity and exploring of new ideas and new ways of interpreting and experiencing things. And we find a lot happening here, where there's new scriptures being composed, and the key concepts of classical Hinduism get developed here at this time. Okay. And then we also have during this time Buddhism going one way, Jainism going another way, and then Hinduism going its way. All right, we got a bit of a split here, where again, because of this creativity at this time, there's going to be new religions that develop and break away from Hinduism, so to speak. Then moving into the classical period, where we get some more new scriptures being developed with new teachings and practices and movements happening. Most notably is the rise of the Bhakti movement, loving devotion to a particular deity of choice. And this is where some sectarianism gets established here. If you, depending on the type, the particular deity you want to be primarily committed to in terms of devotion, if it be Vishnu or Shiva or the great goddess, Mahadev. Okay, and we'll again look into that. Then the medieval period is the rise of Vedanta philosophy, Tantra. Again, Bhakti it becomes very widespread. Mostly the most popular form of Hinduism is the Bhakti tradition. And then, of course, we have the Muslim conquest coming in, and the establishment of the Mughal Empire. And we won't spend too much time on the medieval and modern period, but here is just outlined for you a little bit of the history. And there'll be some videos that go through some of the history. And then, of course, we have the British coming in India and establishing their rule, and then India getting its independence in 1947. Okay, so, but our focus is going to be from the Vedic to the medieval period in terms of giving you an introduction to Hinduism. Okay. So to start off with, the Pre-Vedic period, right? This is around 2700 to 1500 BC, okay? And this is where we have the ancient civilization known as the Indus Valley civilization. And as you can see here, this is the Indus Valley. I'm pointing it as though you can see me pointing to it. But this is in northwest India. A lot of this is in Pakistan today, right? The whole Punjab region is also partly over in that area of northwest India. This is where we have the beginnings of civilization in India, going way back here, around 2500 to 3000 BC, and where people started to settle along the river, and they developed an irrigation system off the river, and then they grew crops on a regular basis and built cities that became quite large in this area and formed the oldest civilization at that time. And the two major cities were Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And they were discovered, as you can see here, in the 1920s by archaeologists, they were quite surprised to find this. And so here you can see a bit of a picture of basically the way the cities were laid out. So you had sort of a central area that was sort of tied in with the palace and the ruling elite, so to speak. They also had large bathing tanks, if you want to call them swimming pools, but they were primarily, it's assumed, primarily for ritual purposes, these large bathing tanks. I think we'll show a picture on another slide. And and you can see by the layout, it seemed to have been a very conservative type of civilization because of how the buildings were all pretty much the same. All the bricks were identical, and the heights of the buildings were all the same. This was really quite uniform, highly structured. So it seems to indicate a highly organized government in some way. Now, it's unfortunate we haven't been able to decipher the script. They had writing, but we haven't been able to translate anything. We haven't been able to decipher the writing. So we don't know that much about the people in terms of their beliefs and whatnot. We do know that they buried the dead in cemeteries. Okay, the dead used to be buried in cemeteries. There are actually cemetery plots, and that's was the norm, was to bury the dead. And do they do that still in India? No, they don't, because the Aryans brought their tradition of cremation, as we'll see. Okay. I want to go to the next slide. Whoops, this way. I want to go, oops. Okay, just hang on here. I never get this right. How do I? There we go. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So here's a picture of the large bathing tanks that they find here. And so most likely for ritual purposes of spiritual cleansing. And this is something we see that still continues on in India today, and actually it's common throughout the world, is that water has spiritual cleansing properties. Purification rituals through water is very, very common and quite universal throughout the world. And so this seemed to be important then, and it still is in India. Okay, especially in such holy rivers like the Ganges River, to have your ashes put in the Ganges River, it purifies your soul of all sin, of bad karma. Okay, you'll be set free from your bad karma. What we also find here is these fertility type symbols in terms of different clay seals, figurines, and indicating that there probably was. I'm not sure if I can move my little face picture thing here somewhere. Indicating a concern over fertility rituals. Again, this is something very common and universal in the ancient world. Was the ancient religious rituals often involved fertility, the union of the male and the female, and through that we have the creation of life. So the ongoing process of ensuring fertility, that there'll be calves born, babies born, that life will continue on. Okay, and working magical rituals to bring that about was key in the ancient world. And so to the left here, you'll see goddess type figurines, or female kind of figurines with breasts and whatnot. And I'll show some more down the road, larger bellies as though they're pregnant. And then also animals that are symbols of fertility, in terms of a bull, where you can kind of see that there's like a bull. They're masculine, kind of big, large, powerful animals with horns is very common. All right. And we'll see some more symbolism along these lines here. Okay, here again, fertility rich symbolism. That's a phallic symbol, an erect penis. That kind of symbolism is also very ancient, and it still continues on in India today, very much associated with the god Shiva, as you can see here, Shiva. And then, of course, a pregnant woman, large belly, large buttocks, large bosom, as though she's at the height of pregnancy. Okay, and that then becomes associated with the great goddess Mahadev, the great goddess. And so here you can see these aspects of the god Shiva and the great goddess that are very popular in India, become very much a part of Hinduism. They go way back to the Indus Valley civilization. These are very, very ancient, okay, going back to the past. And so here we also tied in with Shiva is what's often referred to as a proto-Shiva type imagery on seals here in the Indus Valley civilization period, where we see a deity that's generally held to be a deity in a bit of a lotus position with horns on his head, both of them, okay, horns here, again in a type of lotus position, and surrounded by animals, okay, surrounded by wild animals. And Shiva, later on, as Hinduism develops, it becomes known as a deity who is the god of the yogis, who sustains the universe through his meditation, and is also lord of the animals, right? Lord of the animals. And what's very interesting is, I find, in Western Europe and ancient paganism, you have a similar image and imagery associated with the male deity in pagan Europe, the horned god. Of the forest, of the animals, associated with the animals in the forest and with horns, is the male deity, is very common there as well, which is quite interesting. So going back to that, just to again make sure, we really don't know that much at all about what they believed religiously. We know that they buried the dead, okay, indicating, well, you know, what we usually with personal possessions and whatnot, as though they would continue on in an afterlife. A deity of a goddess and male god, and associate with fertility is what we know. Ritual purification, okay, is what we know. But other than that, we don't know a whole lot about what the people believed, okay, in religious terms. Well, then we come into the Vedic period, around 1500 BC onward, where this is where we have these Aryan tribes coming into India, migrating into India. And so you can see here a bit of a map. They come from Central Asia. As you can see here, some of these Aryan tribes, they go also into Europe, okay, more into Europe to become a lot of the Germanic people and whatnot. They go into India. They also go into Iran, and that's where the word Iran comes from, is from the word Aryan, and also going into a bit into the Mediterranean world. Okay, so they spread all over the place here, and they're often referred to here as the Aryan tribes or Indo-Iranian people, Indo-Iranian. So I tied in with India and Iran, okay, and they bring with them their religion, their priests, their rituals, their gods, their scriptures, their language, and their social class structure. You know, the whole caste system has its roots here with the Aryans. Okay, they were a nomadic people where they roamed with their herds. Cattle was their most prized possession, so they would be migrating here and there with herds of cattle. And they were horsemen. They had horses and chariots. And this is one thing, there was no evidence of any kind of horses or chariots in the Indus Valley civilization. There was none of that there. And the Aryans bring that into India because we see this in archaeological remains, and also we see it in terms of the Vedic texts, and some of the rituals involved the use of horses in rituals, and especially sometimes in sacrifices, okay, in ritual sacrifice, as well as the sacrificing of cattle. So all of that was really brought into India by these nomadic warriors known as the Aryan tribes. Let me just go, and here, just to highlight, this goes too fast here. There. You can see, okay, from that I mentioned here already, you saw how they spread all over the place. The word Aryan literally means the noble ones or the fair-skinned ones. They were a lighter-skinned people. And the indigenous people of India were known as the Dravidians, and they were the dark-skinned people. And the whole caste system was based on skin color. Okay, Varna. Varna is the word for the social class, the different social class. There are four main social classes, and the word Varna literally means class. Okay, in terms of different four classes, and it literally means color. Okay, and so the lighter skinned Aryans were the upper class people, and the darker skinned Dravidians became their servants. And so the whole social class system or caste system is rooted here with the Aryans. And I want to highlight as well is that we have this connection here. Hopefully this will go here. So you can see this chart of the connection between these languages. So we talk about the Indo-European languages. There is a linguistic connection and relationship between the language that we find in India with the languages that we find in Europe. They are very much connected, and there's a lot of parallels in the terminology and language and whatnot. Sanskrit with German, etc. And this is a bit of a tree here that you can see the connections of the languages. And so that again supports the idea that there is this connection of what's happening here, okay, between the Aryans coming into India. Now, the reason why I want to point this out is because I don't know, when did it start? I'm not too sure when it all started, some decades ago, where within India, certain intellectuals or various people started to protest the idea that there were these foreigners that invaded India and brought with them their religion that then became a part of Hinduism, that that kind of belief and idea was largely an extension of Western colonialism to subjugate the Indian people. And so there was a rejection of this whole idea. But there's just too much evidence to support it. There really is, so that now it really has little solidity to it. Here we go. Yes, what are some of the religious beliefs, characteristics, and whatnot of this early period here? Well, with the Aryans coming in, what we find at this time period is that they bring with them, as I mentioned, their religious beliefs and whatnot. They believed in many gods. Okay, they were polytheists, believing there's quite a variety of deities, gods and goddesses. And these deities were largely anthropomorphic, very human-like in terms of qualities. Okay, and we'll see that it was much debated as to who is the number one most powerful god of all the gods here. And that's going to become Indra, and I'll go through those in quite a bit. They entailed performing rituals on a regular basis, primarily done to please the gods, offering foods as a form of sacrifice to the gods. That was almost like sharing a meal, a banquet that's shared. And the most important food that they could give to the gods was cattle, because that was their most prized possession. So it's like you want to bring the best food to the gods. And in doing that, giving this to the gods, you then pray and ask, well, God, please bless us and give us what we need. Protect us, help the crops to grow, make sure we have lots of babies, guarantee us victory in battle, etc., etc. Okay? And so there's going to be these various rituals and prayers done. And eventually, and I'll go into this more detail down the road, the idea develops is that through these rituals, they could restore order in the world by recreating the universe. That the world generally kind of decays over time, and there can be a ritual done of restoring its original pristine order to basically recreate the universe. It's going to be something that comes up. Then also about the afterlife, they're going to embody the belief that when you die, you will be judged by Varuna, one of the deities that we'll talk about, and you will be going to either the house of the ancestors, so it's sort of like a heavenly realm, the house of the fathers, where our dead ancestors go, or under the earth, you go to the house of clay, which is not a hell the way we think of hell. It's just a dark, dreary, cold, rather blah place to go. Okay, and we'll go through this here more thoroughly. So some of the gods here that were important to the Aryans. And then, of course, it's in the Vedic scriptures. It's going to be in their scriptures. First of all, is Agni the god of fire. Agni is always present in every ritual that's done and is called upon. Agni functions as a type of priest, is a mediator. And that's what a priest basically is. A priest is the one who is sort of the go-between between the humans and the other gods. All right. And so a priest is sort of the one. I go to the priest and say, oh, priest, please tell the gods that I want this or I need this, and da 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 da. And so the priest is a mediator that communicates and creates a connection between humans and the other gods and the gods. And Agni, as a god, is a type of priest who, through the fire, is present in the fire. You then put your sacrifice on the fire. And then as it turns into smoke and transforms from matter, it then transforms into something spiritual. And then as you speak your prayers, that fire and smoke is taking your prayers and the sacrifice up to the gods. And so Agni is the one who takes your offerings and sacrifices and your prayers up to the other gods. Okay. And that is his key role. So he plays a critically important role and is always there in all the rituals. There will always be some kind of a fire. And that's why, and this is something very common throughout all religions, is the use of incense, candles, okay, sacrifices through fire is so worldwide spread. Because fire has the magical ability of taking something that's material and transforming it into something spiritual and takes it over to the other side. Okay, that's the key thing. And so here are just some pictures of Agni. And as you see, this is something that's always common in India, is all the deities are usually riding and working with an animal of some kind, right? As though it's their power. Brings them power. And it seems, again, it's kind of a bit of an evolution of the shamanic idea of a power animal to more and more of a human type deity. And you'll get it often, like if you look at ancient Egyptian religion, some of their deities are like half human, half animal, like a human form, but a crocodile head, or the head of a dog, or human body, or the body of a lion and a human head. You know, you'll have that kind of blend. And it seems to go from animal spirits to half human, half animal, to human riding an animal, to then just totally human type of thing, to no image whatsoever. That's sort of the evolution. Okay, just to give you a heads up on that. Okay, so another deity that's very common and universal in ancient India is that of Soma. Soma is a personification of some kind of a plant, a hallucinogenic plant that has those kind of properties. And it's assumed it might be a mushroom. It's described as a plant that grows in the mountains, and that when you squeeze that plant, a milky juice comes out that's super powerful. In fact, if you drink it straight, it will kill you. But if you dilute it, okay, dilute it with some milk or whatever fluid, a few drops of it, it will then bring you vision of the gods. Okay, it brings you vision of the gods. And so Soma is a deity that embodies, is that plant as a living being. The plant that brings you vision as a living being. And so here you can see it's very much connected to ancient shamanism as well. You know, the shamanic use of plant substances that are seen as like ayahuasca in the Amazon. That is Mother Ayahuasca is like a living being, a deity, that when you take that plant substance and you get vision of the gods, and she will appear to you and speak to you, right? This is sort of what Soma is. It's a living being in that plant, an intelligence that can be activated and communicated with, and will bring you into the world of the gods, so you can then see the gods, have vision of the gods. It's like the shamanic journey. And then two, it's held that then you gain the sense of strength and power. And it's also like a drink of immortality. You shall be like the gods, become like them. You know, is this like what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Is that a plant substance that Eve and Adam took so they shall become like God? You know, is there that connection there? You know, it's interesting stuff. But this is the tradition here, and it's held in the Vedic texts that Soma is that which the gods themselves have taken, that has given them strength and power and to become immortal. That's how they became gods, is by taking this plant substance, especially the god Indra. Well, I think he's the next one that I talk about here. Okay, yeah, Indra. Indra is the god associated with rain and storm and thunder and lightning. And he's the one that brings victory in battle. So that here is a picture of him slaying the demon who was holding back the water, having the planet be in a period of drought, and everything was drying up. And so Indra comes rumbling on his chariot, is the thunder that you hear, and his thunderbolts, his lightning bolts, destroys the demon of drought to burst him open so that the waters will flow to the earth, right, and bring the much needed water that will sustain life. So this is Indra. He's a god of power and strength, associated with the thunder, lightning, and storm, and also is the one that would be called upon by the Aryans whenever they'd go into battle, that he would guarantee their victory in battle. He would go before them in battle. And so, as I was going to intimate just before this, is Indra gets his power from drinking Soma. Okay, so there is a Vedic hymn in the scriptures. When I say Vedic, it's a particular text, a Hindu scripture, where Indra is saying, "Oh, look at me! I can uphold the earth with one finger. Oh, look how strong I am!" And then it's like, "Oh, geez, have I been drinking Soma?" And he brags, "I can do this, and I have such power and such strength, and I can do this, and I can do that." And then the other gods are saying, "Oh, has Indra been drinking Soma?" And it goes on where he's bragging about his power, his strength, and what he can all do as a god. And the alternating phrase is always, "Oh, he's been drinking Soma." It is the basis of his strength and power and immortality. So another deity that was very important here amongst the Aryans and is there in the ancient Vedic texts is Varuna. He's the one that oversees the cosmic order, the order of the universe, of nature, to make sure that the sun rises when it does, and the moon comes when it does, the rains will come when they come, just that there's order in nature, the order in the universe, in a natural world, but also he oversees the moral order in terms of how people live, if they've been good or not, okay? So here, Varuna is very similar to the god that we have in the Jewish biblical tradition, okay, in the whole Judeo-Christian biblical tradition. He's very similar. And so he's described as someone who sits on his throne up there in heaven in a palace with 1,000 columns surrounding him. And he oversees the order of the universe. And he'll have these spirits going out to the earth, checking up on people, keeping tabs on everybody, seeing who's naughty and who's nice, all right, and keeping a record of their deeds. And they will then fly back up to Varuna and tell them, "Oh, this person has not been good. Okay, he's been evil, he's been unrighteous, he's been committing sins." And Varuna will then send judgment upon that person. And it's like everything will go wrong in their life. It's like they're being cursed, right? Just disaster happens. And so you'll have a prayer. There's a prayer in the text. I usually read it in class, where this fellow is very similar, like to the book of Job in the Bible, where, I'll just relay the story. There's a story in the Bible of this man named Job, and how one day it describes that there's God in heaven, and along comes Satan, the evil one. Right? The word Satan literally means the adversary, which means the accuser, always making accusations. And so God is up there in heaven, and along comes the accuser, Satan. And God says, "Look at my servant Job down there on earth. What a good man he is. He's just so good. He always does what's right. He's so righteous, and he honors me and praises me, and he's such a good man." And the devil, the accuser, says, "He's only so good because you've blessed him so much. I bet you if you take everything away from him, he'll curse you to your face." Right? So that's the accusation that the devil makes. He's the accuser. And so God says, "Oh, really? You think so? Well, I tell you what. I'll let you take everything away from Job and destroy everything, but do not take his life. And let's see what Job does. And so here, the bet is on. The bet is, will Job still be a good person, still worship God, still do the right thing, even if everything gets taken away from him? He loses his big ranch that he had, hundreds of cattle that he had. He was very wealthy, very prosperous, successful, had a big family. Everything was great in his life, right? With all of that being taken away, and that's what Satan does, he comes down and destroys everything. Everything gets taken away. Even his family deserts him, and he's left in pain, covered with boils, but still alive. Right? And the bet is on. What is Job going to do? Is he still going to be a good person in the face of this, or is he going to turn around and start cursing God? And this is the classic, issue. Oh, why is it bad things happen to good people? What do you do when you're in that situation, that kind of a test? Well, so that's sort of the story of Job, is that even his friends come around him saying, Job, you must have committed a terrible sin because God is obviously angry with you. He's just destroyed and taken everything. It's like you're cursed by God. And Job is like, well, I don't know what I've done. I've only done what's good. I've only been a good person. I've always worshiped God. I don't understand this, And that's sort of the scenario there. Well, here in the Vedic text over in India, you have a very similar kind of situation. There's some guy, who knows who he is, but he has this very similar prayer to Varuna, saying, oh, Varuna, oh, please show me the sin that I've committed. I don't know what it is. I've only tried to do what's good and right before you. I've only just worshiped you and praised you and done what is righteous. Please forgive me of my sins, even though I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my relatives did. Please forgive them if they did something wrong. Please, may you once again receive my offerings, my prayers, not being angry with me. So you have someone begging Varuna for forgiveness, feeling as though he's being judged by God. So it's very interesting because it's so similar conceptually what's going on here between over in India to over in ancient Israel somewhere. Okay, so I always find those things very interesting. But this is Varuna. So he is the one that is a type of judge. He's very similar to the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, okay, in the Jewish tradition there. And he's the one that judges people according to their deeds, and he is the one who determines what happens to them when they die, where they go in the afterlife. Whoops, and let me just kind of backtrack one point. Whoops. And one thing just to highlight, though, is that in the text, it indicates that there was a bit of a battle going on in terms and I'm just highlighting the most important gods, a few of the most important. There are hundreds of deities, okay? There's a lot of different gods and goddesses, but these are the central ones that always show up. And anyways, a debate started to kind of come in here as to, geez, all these different gods, who is the number one God? Who is the most important God, the most powerful God? Okay, the number one, the God above all the other gods. Okay, a debate kind of comes in here, and the battle was basically between, is it Indra or is it Varuna that is the number one God? It's called henotheism, that one God is more important and more dominant over the others. And Indra is the one that wins the battle. Indra becomes to be seen here in this ancient time as the number one most important of all the gods. And Varuna starts to fade in the background, okay, which is interesting. So then to take a look here in terms of what did they believe about the afterlife? Well, it's not reincarnation. That is a concept that develops later on. Okay, here in this early period, it was believed that you just had one life. And after your life, you will be judged according to your deeds. Varuna is the one that will judge you if you've been a good person or not so good person. Did you worship the gods and do your rituals? Were you righteous and didn't do evil? Then good going for you, okay? So, but Varuna is the judge. And so the way it was understood is that you would journey to the afterlife after your cremation. And Agni is the god of fire, who then will take your physical body as it's being burned, and that material body then transforms to then become its spiritual form as it's turned from matter into smoke, into that smoke from the fire. All right, it's transformed from material to spiritual. And then Agni takes the soul up towards Varuna to be judged. Okay, so that's how you then leave the physical world and go into the spiritual world, is through cremation. And then Varuna will judge if you will then go either to the house of the ancestors, where the dead ancestors go, the righteous ones, also called the house of the fathers, where you will then live with the gods, reside with the gods, believed to be around by the moon somewhere, okay, literally out there by the moon. And that there you would feast with the gods and just feast to your heart's content. It's like here on earth, but it's described as being 100 times better than the best of what you can have here on earth. It's like, it's fantastic. There's no suffering, there's no evil, there's no hardship. Okay, you will get a new body that's just like your physical one here on earth, but of a spiritual form and nature. Okay, but it'll be just like this one, and you'll still look like you and be like you, right? And then you will have just a great rest of your life, eternity. Okay, it was believed to be forever. Right? Now, if you were judged as not being good, then your body, your soul would be taken, and you'll just remain in the earth. You'll be taken into the earth, and you go to the house of clay, and that's then where you abide. And it's just cold and dark and nothing great. It's just nothing great, okay, for the evil people. All right, that's the house of clay. And so you can see what's going to develop from here is the concepts of heaven and hell are going to evolve out of this. All right, where heaven will become more beautiful and wonderful, and the house of clay will become more hellish, of torture and punishment and all that. But initially, it was just a dark, shadowy, kind of yucky place, nothing great. Okay, and that's a very similar concept that you see in ancient China and also in the ancient Near East, even in ancient Israel in the Bible. Very similar initial concepts. Okay. All right, but then it all evolves from there. Okay. I think I'm going to end here pretty quick. Yeah, I'm just going to make this one point here, and maybe pick this up then for the next, yeah, because this gets complicated here, and I think I'll end, whoops, here. So in terms of rituals, and I'll kind of go through this a bit more in the next module as well, but just so you know, there are basically 3 types of rituals that were done, and they were done by the Brahmin priests, not, So you would have, on the one hand, there would be rituals done on a daily basis in the home by the father, who's the head of the house. These were domestic rituals done in the home by the father on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, there'd be using the fire that you'd use for cooking. That would be the altar. That's where the god Agni would be. And you would have a little bit of a food offering, or you'd have your daily prayers to the gods and the dead ancestors. Okay, you'd have your daily prayers of offering, and that was always done by the father. And that's why it's always important to have a son who can then replace that father initially, and to continue on these rituals, because this ensures the well-being of the family. It ensures the well-being of the dead ancestors. It's imperative to always have a son. Okay, and this is going to be a similar thing that's going to happen in China. And yeah, just to be aware of that. That's one thing, is because it can't be done by the women. It's always done by the father, who's the head of the home. Okay, all right. So that's one type of ritual done by the father on a daily basis. The second type of ritual was done by a very particular priest known as the Atharvan priest, and he's going to use a particular Veda known as the Atharva Veda. And we'll go into that in a bit, so don't freak out. You'll get it more later. Okay, the Atharvan priest. And he does special kinds of rituals to meet special needs. Okay, rituals for special purposes, individual needs. So say if you had a sick child, he would come to your home and do a special ritual of healing for your sick child. If you felt that your crop had been cursed by your neighbor, he would remove the curse on your garden in the backyard and bring the blessings of the gods. If you think that an evil spirit has taken over somebody or something, he would do an exorcism and remove the evil spirit. Okay, so he would do various rituals to meet special needs of individuals or people's homes. Okay, that's the Atarvan priest. It was sort of like a shaman, medicine man, healer type figure. Then the third type of rituals were done by a group of priests. There'd be quite a number of them. And this was for larger public rituals to serve the whole community, to serve the whole village or a certain region or area, for the king or the local ruler or chieftain, okay, the head of the tribe. They would be doing rituals on a regular basis, tied in with the cycles of the moon and the seasons, to make sure the rains come, that the crops grow, that the people are protected from harm, that they will be blessed, with health and well-being. Just regular rituals to serve and meet the needs of the larger community. Okay, so those are the three basic types of rituals that were done. All right, okay, so that's all I'm going to do in this module, and I'll continue on in the next one because there's still a lot more to talk about. Okay.